She'd had enough, and she's normally very patient, yet she'd hit her breaking point. I have two boys, which means they fight constantly. And normally I'm the one that's like, hey, cut it out. And normally I'm like, at some point it's just going to lead to a fist fight. So just let it, get a couple swings in, then we'll be over it, we'll be past it. We'll be a little tougher for it, and everybody will be fine. Everybody will be mad for a little bit. My wife is a mother, so she's like, I don't like the idea of them hitting each other. I'm like, that's the problem with our country these days, but never mind. I'm like, all right, I kind of understand that. And so we try to do this balance of trying to help them figure it out and also wanting to keep our sanity at the same time. And she had hit her breaking point, and I wasn't around, but I could hear it, and that's how I knew she hit her breaking point, and I loved it. I'm like, yes! Yes! I was working on a project, one of my epic projects that I thought would be 30 minutes to an hour based on a YouTube video. We had now entered the 6th hour of the project, and I'm not sure whether or not any of that contributed to her losing her mind, but very well could have. And so I went into the kitchen where she was, and she said, "Did you hear me lose it?" And I said, "Mm-hmm." And I said, I gotta go to the hardware store. Which one of them do you want me to take? And she said, I don't care. Just pick one. And so I did. And on our way to the hardware store, we were driving, and he said, why do we have to go to the hardware store? And I explained to him home ownership and all of the joys that come with that. And I explained to him that, sometimes you want to improve things, sometimes you need to maintain things, and so these are projects that need to be done. In order to do the projects, you need to sometimes get supplies, and I don't have all the supplies, so we are going. And he said, well, why do we have to go all the way to Green Bay? And then I explained to him that we have a couple local options, but the local options don't have in stock the things that we needed, and that explained all of that to him. And he said, well, today's turned out a lot different than I thought it was going to. And I said, what do you mean? Like the fact that you and your brother are picking on each other and having trouble there? What are you getting at? He's like, no, that I have to ride with you all the way to Green Bay and back and do nothing fun in the process. And I'm like, well, hanging out with you's fun, buddy. And thank you. I thought it was wonderful. And we went, and we did have a great time together. And then we got back home, and I got the new supplies that I was convinced were going to make the project just a breeze. And so, as the project entered its 10th hour, that's not an exaggeration, I had fish tape in the wall because I was trying to find an access point. And there's HVAC units run, so it's a very, very narrow thing. And I finally reached it to where the fish tape was finally sliding through as I wanted it to, and I'm like, I'm tired, but I'm like, yes, finally success has come my way. And I just keep it. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be, but all right. And I just kept feeding the fish tape in through the opening. And I'm up on a ladder, and I don't have the lights on because I'm trying to follow light from the source where I'm running the fish tape. And all of a sudden, I feel something brush my ear. And I'm like, do we have bats? What is that? And when I fling my hand, I hit the hook to the fish tape that had somehow come all the way back around. And as I'm feeding it through, thinking, wow, I'm being really successful, it's just coming right back at me, and it's dark. I don't see it. It hits me in the ear, and that's when I said, I'm done. It's enough. This one's out of my pay grade. I'm over it. Now, sometimes when things don't go according to plan, it's a minor annoyance. Sometimes it's a major annoyance. Sometimes when things don't go according to plan, it's a crisis. And today we're going to kick off what we're calling the journey. And we're going to look at the life of one of the more remarkable people that we see in Scripture, the life of Joseph. But it's not just going to be a historical look back, because there are stories in the life of Joseph that have implications for each and every one of us. So we've kind of built this series and we've built this idea around this. What happens when life doesn't go according to plan? When you feel forgotten and betrayed by the people you thought you could count on. When lies and accusations are accepted as fact. When you're despised, rejected, and thrown away. What happens when life is better than you could ever imagine? When power and prestige are defining characteristics of your life? When you have the ability to not only dream, but see those dreams become a reality? What happens when life doesn't go according to plan, but the direction it takes is better than something you could have ever imagined? Join us as we unpack the life of Joseph and find the answers to those questions and more. If you have your phones or your tablets, I'd invite you to follow along with us this morning in the Bible app. It's a free resource that you can find whatever app store you utilize on your device. And once you have it installed, there are a number of great features. Go to the events feature within the Bible app and either enable your locations or write in Lakeside, Algoma will pop up and you can follow along with us that way. If you have a traditional Bible with you this morning, we're going to be in the very first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 37. We're going to start in verse 1 in just a minute. If you're joining us via the stream this morning, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Brian. I'm part of the team here at Lakeside, and the verses will be available for you on the screen below as we now journey and unpack the life of Joseph. Genesis 37, verse 1, and the start of verse 2, we read this. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. So before we get to Joseph, we see Jacob's story is coming to an end. And just to follow the genealogy and the lineage from Joseph, there was Joseph's great-grandfather was Abraham. And then Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob. One of Jacob's sons are Joseph. Now, this is an incredible legacy of faith. Now, it doesn't mean that they always got it right. In fact, they introduced problems that have continued to present day. There were major mishaps and major mistakes, major bouts where they did not trust God and where they wrestled and where they rebelled and all of these things. There were character issues. And yet, this is an incredible legacy of faith. And so I just want to pause here before we really dive in and just remind you, parents and grandparents, you have a lot of responsibilities, you have a lot of pressure, but one of the things you really have to try to do is instill within your kids and your grandkids a legacy of faith. I promise you, you are never going to regret the time you spend doing that. You're never going to regret the time. Have spiritual conversations. Be vulnerable with your kids and with your grandkids. Talk about the ways that God has blessed you and the successes in your life. Talk about your sin. Talk about your struggles. You don't have to go into gross detail, but talk about your weaknesses and the times that God has redeemed you and how God has worked on you and the times that you fail. Trust me, they already know. So just be open and be honest about it and talk with them about, as is age appropriate, about the journey and the struggles that you've been on and instill within them a desire to grow in their faith and in a legacy of faith. And always remember this, spiritual conversations are great, making church a priority is fantastic, but always remember this, more is caught than taught. More is caught than taught. They will listen to your words, but what I promise you they will do, even more than that, is they will watch your life. And they will know whether or not you mean it. They will know whether or not it's of value to you. They will know whether or not it's something you live out or it's something you're just kind of going through the motions with. And so I just want to encourage you to make it a point, make it a priority, make it just a major part of your relationship and your communication. Be vulnerable, be honest, exalt Christ, and make it a point to try to instill within them the legacy of faith. We get to the end of verse 2 now where we read this. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them to their father. All right, so what's going on? Joseph is 17. He's out working in the field, working the flock with his brothers. Oh, and here, just an aside, but something we should keep in mind. Jacob, he had 4 wives. He had 4 wives. So there's some polygamy going on. And Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Now, of that, you can imagine there are going to be some pressures. There's going to be some interesting family dynamics at play to begin with. And now you have all of these kids together from all your different mothers. You have Jacob with his 4 total wives, and you have Joseph. And Joseph is out there, and he's working in the field along with his older brothers, and he narcs on them. He comes back, and he's like, hey, they aren't working very hard. They aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Their vaping break is turned into 27 minutes. They're running back. He's running back, and he's tattling. And anybody that's had kids understands what this dynamic is like. You understand what this dynamic is like. Now, Israel, that is Jacob, loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. So Jacob loved Joseph the most. He was his favorite. And again, parents, I just want to caution you. If you have a favorite, be very careful because I promise you your kids know. They do. They know. And you might think, well, I keep it close to my vest. No, but they know. You don't have to say it. They already know. And by the way, almost every kid thinks their other siblings are the favorite. So you just need to know that in advance. If you give them evidence for that, it's something that they carry with them for a long time, probably for a lifetime. And some of you grew up in a situation where you knew you weren't the favorite. Some of you carry to this day wounds because you know that your parents loved your sibling more than you. They did things for them that they wouldn't do for you. They showed favoritism. And so to this day, you carry with you wounds as a result of that dynamic. And so there's just ingrained within you feelings of inadequacy and feelings that you can't measure up and that you're not enough. And if you trace it back, it's traced back to the family dynamic of what it was like with a sibling who was more loved and valued than you. So parents, I just want to really encourage you, break that cycle. And if you have a favorite, and this isn't here to judge you or to guilt you or anything along those lines. I'm not saying that you don't love your other kids if you have a favorite, but what I am telling you is they already know. Now Jacob, he's just like, yeah, I made him a special robe. And the brothers see this. And now what happens? They don't go to their father and have those conversations. They don't work through what that does to their psyche with their dad. They instead put their attention on Joseph. Joseph has the robe. Joseph's the favorite. Joseph's the narc. And now what happens? They hate their brother. They hate their brother because their brother is the favorite. And they hate him so much they can't even hide it. They can't even pretend to like him. They can't even pretend to get along with him. Now, this is a dynamic that happens in a lot of families. Again, some of you have come from this dynamic. Some of you to this day, you carry that along with you. And now, we don't have polygamy in our society, but we do have a number of blended families. And now you bring in the idea of a step-parent or a set of step-parents in different environments entered into this equation. And you have some step-parents who are like, no, I love every one of my stepchildren as though they're my own. And you have other step-parents that are like, well, I love them, but they're not my kids. And then you have other step-parents that are like, oh, we have your kids again this weekend? Great. You have everything around there. And then you try to blend family dynamics where you have people coming and living together under the same roof who are in the same house, and sometimes you're together, and then other weeks certain kids aren't present, and these things are very complicated. They're very difficult to navigate. Now, what we have in our society, again, is not polygamy, but we have blended families from different reasons, but we have a situation where all of these things can occur. And you then have kids who don't know how to cycle through life. You have parents who don't really know the best way of helping them along the journey. You have step-parents who are trying their best or absent, not wanting anything to do with it. And we have people in every one of those situations who then grow up and oftentimes have kids of their own. And when you then introduce sibling hate on top of it, it's a recipe for dysfunction. It's a recipe for confusion. It's a recipe for insecurity. Now, Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Now, they already hate Joseph, and then Joseph has a dream, and he tells his brothers his dream. And the tension increases. Now, if we're just reading this, we might be like, maybe he's trying to build a bridge. Maybe he's trying to find common ground. Maybe he's trying to come alongside of them. Well, then we're told the dream. Joseph said to them, verse 6 says, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and his words. Now we discover why the tension increased. Anybody who has a sibling understands this dynamic. In the same way you understand going and being an ark. Mom, my brother's doing this. My sister's doing that. Mom, you said that they needed to clean their room, but they're on video games instead. Mom, like everybody knows this dynamic. And now the dynamic isn't just going to the parents. It's going to the siblings. Hey, I had a dream last night. You guys? You're going to bow down to me. You guys are, you're going to be beneath me. And can't you just hear it? You walk up with that smile on your face. And he's not lying. It's what he dreamed. And I'm sure it's a very vivid dream. Very vivid dream. But going up to the brothers and going through all of that. Now, as if families aren't already complicated enough, we introduce even more tension oftentimes. And that's where a sibling no longer speaks to their other siblings. Sometimes it's for no good reason. Sometimes it's for very good reasons. And yet, there's now another layer of wounds and another layer of trouble, where people that should be close friends and people that you can count on have become bitter enemies. Sometimes it's because of the choices that people make and how they conduct their lives. Sometimes it's because feelings of favoritism. Sometimes it revolves around tension as the parents age for the best course of action to help them as they grow older. Sometimes it's tension over what is left in an estate. Somebody feels shortchanged or that they were robbed, that somebody weaseled their way in and took things that shouldn't be theirs. But in relationships that should be some of the strongest that are available to us as humans, we see all the effects of sin. We see all of the impact that hurt causes. Now, I don't know what your relationship with your parents was like. I don't know what your relationship with your kids is like. I don't know what your relationship with your siblings is like. But I do know this, that when those relationships are not as strong as you hoped they would be or as you want them to be, it causes a unique kind of hurt. Now, again, I don't know the situation. I don't know the circumstances. But I do know that hurt caused by family is one of the hurts that we carry with us the longest. And maybe today, right now, in the quietness of this moment, in the quietness of your heart, just between you and God, and the Spirit that's within you, maybe it's time that you just confess something. Maybe it's been years, but you look back and you think, I could have done that different. I should have done that different. Or maybe it's been years and you look back and you say, I still can't believe that's what they did to me. I still can't believe this is how they handled that situation. And maybe you've masked it. Maybe you've masked it with a demeanor of indifference. But deep down, those wounds are present. And maybe right now is the time to just invite God to go to work in that baggage. And maybe it's the time you need to forgive somebody once and for all. Or maybe today's the day that you need to send somebody a message or give them a call and just say, hey, can we talk? Can we process through this? Will you forgive me? I don't know what that looks like in your situation. I don't know what that looks like in your circumstance. And if you don't know what that needs to look like right now, but you know that something needs to happen because of weights that you're carrying and things, then I would just invite you to reach out to us this week. We have a team of people who'd be willing to sit down with you in a place that news that you share with them goes no further than that room, that can help you guide, that can ask questions, that can open up sometimes, better understanding. Family wounds cut deep, and they impact our lives in a way that few other things do. Thus he dreamed another dream, verse 9 tells us. and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." Now, I love this. And the reason that I love this is because Joseph tells them the first dream. It goes horribly. They hate him even more. And he's like, "Had another one. Guess what happened this time? Guess what happened this time?" He doesn't back down. He doesn't shy away from it. First time didn't go so well, so he doubles down. He's like, had it again. And here's what happened. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me. But when he told it to his father, verse 10 tells us, and his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Now Jacob rebukes him. His brothers are jealous. But his dad keeps it in the back of his mind. Now, Joseph's at this age. He's 17. And this is a really difficult thing. And nothing has changed. This is still really, really difficult age to navigate and to parent and to help people process through things. Because on one hand, you're still a child. And on the other hand, we've let you drive for a year. And you're a year away from voting and going to prison for real if you make a mistake. And all of those things. And yet your parents, when they look at you, they still remember the kid that they changed their diapers of. And so there's this delicate balance that leads to a lot of tension. And kids at that age, they think they don't have enough freedom. No matter how much freedom you give them, it isn't enough. And parents feel like their kids are rebelling and they're getting too far away from them. And it seems like no matter what advice you give them, they aren't willing to listen to it. And you just shake your head because you're like, I know a thing or two. Even if I don't know your vocabulary and I don't know how to communicate with you anymore because of all the stupid sayings that you have, I still have life knowledge and I still know what to do. Please just listen to me. And there's this tension. And generally that tension goes on for 20 years. And then kids start to realize, oh, wow, my parents do know a few things. They aren't as dumb as I thought they were. And parents recognize, oh, wow, my kids have some great insight. And it's not just that they operate technology better than I do. They have a really unique ability to look at the world and to see things and to create things and to dream of things and to come up with better systems and better processes. Joseph tells Jacob his dream, and Jacob says rebukes him. But notice what Jacob does. He keeps it in the back of his mind. The brothers, they're jealous. And they just hate him even more. So, what do we do with all of this? With all of this? First is let's recognize and let's realize that many of the problems and the situations that we face in our families today, many of the wounds that many of us carry for various reasons aren't revolutionary. They aren't new. And on one hand, that's really depressing. And on the other hand, it's really exciting because what it means is that we are not the first people who have to navigate this. We are not the first people who have to go through these things. And certainly, we would hope that we would ultimately get to the point where nobody would go through life with family wounds. But the problem with that is everybody who's in a family is an individual, and everybody who's an individual has a problem in their life called sin, and every single one of us is imperfect. And families are made up, whatever your family looks like, whether it's a traditional family, a blended family, whatever your family looks like, it has people, both parents and children and grandparents, and whether there's step-parents or stepsisters and brothers, whether they're just your full siblings, whatever that looks like, there's imperfection because there's sin. And sin always has consequences, which means there is always going to be tension. Whether you have the world's best parent or the world's worst parent, whether you've got the best sibling that was ever born or the worst sibling that was ever born, and depending on the day is how you might answer that question. You have imperfect people in your family, which means sometimes they're going to wrong us. Sometimes that's intentional. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes we have great parents who did the best that they could. And did they make mistakes along the way? Absolutely, because they're imperfect people. But they did their best. And sometimes we just shake our head in society because we look at the parents that some people have. We're just like, you got to be kidding me. How is this possible? How is this the case? Kids, your parents need forgiveness too. Parents, your kids need forgiveness too. Your siblings need forgiveness. None of us get it right all the time. And carrying the weight and the bitterness and the rage is never easy and it's never beneficial. So I want to talk right now, especially to parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers, college-age kids right in that window. And I just want to say the best thing you can do for them as they're at the most awkward stage of their life is just love them. And you're going to be like, I have 3 different kids all rolled into one exactly, and they don't know how to fully process that. You don't know how to fully process that. You're on the journey together. Love them through it. Love them when they're annoying. Love them when they're easy. Love them when they're difficult. Just love them through it. Students, recognize that you didn't come with a manual, right? Your parents, whether they want to admit this or not, your grandparents, they're learning as they go. They're not perfect. They're going to get it wrong sometimes. But God has put them in your life to guide you and direct you, to help you. And believe it or not, I know you might hate the way that they dress. I know you might hate the way they talk. I know you might think everything about them is sus and lame, and you're cringing right now because I said sus. I recognize that. You just recognize that God has put them in your life, and they have wisdom. And that doesn't mean you're always going to see everything eye to eye. But if you will believe the best in them and believe that they want what's best for you, that will make everything go smoother. And parents, if you would remember, hey, they're getting to that age where, okay, they've got ideas and they see things, and I want to be the safety net for them. But also I want to give them permission to dream. And sometimes you're going to be like, that's the dumbest idea I have ever heard in my life. And you're going to be absolutely right. And sometimes you're going to think, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. But that's one you're going to need to keep in the back of your mind. As we're going to see the story of Joseph unfold, he wasn't crazy. If you have tension with a sibling, first of all, if there's a need for you to forgive them, it starts there. If there's a need for you to find forgiveness, then go to them, confess, and ask it. And if to this day you carry the weight that you weren't the favorite, and so you've always questioned whether or not you're loved and whether or not you're valued, I can't explain the actions of your parents other than to say they're imperfect people. But I can remind you that before you were born, God is the one who ultimately knit you together. God is the one who designed you. And sometimes people don't see the value in us that our Creator does. So my invitation to you would be to never derive your value and your worth because of the imperfections of your parents. God, I pray that you would help us as we try to navigate, as we try to live within the tension that so often comes about from family dynamics. God, help us. I pray, God, that you would help the person who feels that they've been neglected, that they weren't the favorite, feels unloved. And God, I pray that they wouldn't derive their value or their worth in how their parents saw them or their grandparents saw them. Pray for the person that's in the middle of tension with their siblings. And I pray, God, that there would just be a spirit of forgiveness and grace and peace that rules over that relationship. Pray for kids who are trying to navigate becoming adults and what that looks like, and trying to navigate a feeling that they aren't the favorite or that they aren't represented or understood. God, I pray that you'd help them be patient. God, I pray you'd help them understand. And God, I pray for people who carry with them wounds. And I pray you'd heal them, as ultimately only you can. So, Lord, we ask you to work in our stories and in our families for your glory. It's in your Son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen.